whole body's made of cells. The deficiency syndrome affects each and every one of our cells because C15's whole job is just to keep the membrane of our cells, which is made up of fatty acids, to keep it strong. C15 is a super sturdy, strong fatty acid resistant to lipid peroxidation, reactive oxidation, all these things that happen as we get older. It literally strengthens the integrity of our cell membrane so that our cells can stay strong and fight off aging-related breakdown. If we don't have enough C15, it actually accelerates the aging process. And this is where we propose that helps explain why younger and younger people are getting heart disease, fatty liver disease, certain types of cancers, is because they don't have that basic brick structure to be able to protect their cells.
Dr. Stephanie Venn-Watson, welcome to the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I am so excited to have you here today.
Carrie, it's great to be here.
My goodness. Well, today, for everyone who's listening, we're talking all things aging, health span, longevity, cell health, with one super cool essential fatty acid called C15. And I know I'm going to butcher it when I say the name, but it's pentadecanoic acid. How did I do?
You're close. I mean, give that an A. It's a pentadecanoic acid.
Pentadecanoic acid, but otherwise we shorten it to
C15.
C15. And so for those of you who've probably never heard of C15 before, Stephanie has this amazing TED Talk that involves the history of it and dolphins. So you can't go wrong watching it. So let's start with the basics. What is C15 and why is it considered such a huge breakthrough?
Sure. So C15 is an odd chain saturated fatty acids. We're going to go nerdy science right out of the gate here, Carrie. And so, we know a lot of people know or have heard of fatty acids. We usually think about like omega-3s are good examples of fatty acid. So this is a type of fatty acid, but very different in which it has an odd number of carbons, C15, and it is a saturated fat, which is unusual to be talking about healthy saturated fats. But long story short, Carrie, this is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in over 90 years since omega-3, which means our bodies need certain levels of it just to maintain our baseline health. And so we're excited to be able to share all the science around it.
And I think that's the coolest. I mean, it's been decades since we found an essential fatty acid, and we've had it in us the whole time.
Exactly.
How did we not know?
Dolphins. We just needed the dolphins.
Thank goodness for the dolphins. So give us that little history, and then we'll get into all the research and all the really cool things that have magically come out of C15 now that we know about it thanks to you. So where do the dolphins come into this?
Sure. So this whole discovery, Carrie, was an accident. It's not like we said, oh, let's go help dolphins and let's plan to make a groundbreaking discovery to save the world. I'm a veterinary epidemiologist and worked for CDC, World Health Organization. And then about 20 years ago, I was recruited by the Navy to help do veterinary epidemiology, look for patterns of health and disease in the Navy's dolphins in San Diego. So I was like, yes, please. This will be great. And thought I'd be there for just a couple of years. Ended up being there for 20 years. So Navy's cared for a sustained population of about 100 bottlenose dolphins for over 60 years. They live in San Diego Bay. They go out into the open ocean every day. Every day they choose to come back. Navy takes such good care of them, Carrie, that Navy dolphins live into their 40s and 50s, when in the wild they live to like 20. So we were sitting on a population of really old dolphins. And so as they were getting older, we were seeing that they were developing a lot of aging associated diseases that looked just like us. So we had some dolphins getting high cholesterol, chronic inflammation, fatty liver disease, Alzheimer's, and so it was really this cohort that looked a lot like aging humans. And what was really fascinating was that some dolphins were getting these aging associated diseases while others were not. So that allowed us exactly to go, And so we used this technology called metabolomics. We looked at thousands of small molecules present in the archived serum of the dolphins, as well as in their all fish diet, to figure out which small molecules predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. And, we went in with an assumption that it was going to be omega-3s because all they eat are fish. And we were wrong. And it ended up being C15 was right there in the top predictor of the healthiest aging dolphins present in their fish.
And we humans have it in our cells as well.
We do. And so our primary source of it isn't from fish, because in fish, it's mainly in the heads and the skin, which we don't tend to eat. Right. So for us, our primary source by far of C15 is our whole fat dairy products. So that's where part of the problem is coming, is we've taken C15 really out of our diet over the past 50 years by decreasing our intake of whole dairy fat.
That is actually a really good point. And one of the things you said, and I want to bring this up because I've heard you talk about it before, was fatty liver. So first of all, it's interesting dolphins get fatty liver, but we know in humans, fatty liver is exponentially on the rise. And most everyone probably has heard it called non-alcoholic fatty liver. But for those who don't know, it got a name overhaul in 2023 called metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic fatty liver, or liver disease. However, as the name implies, it's metabolic dysfunction. But I heard you on Dr. Will Cole talk about fatty liver and how it may not necessarily, in some people, like dolphins, be associated with a metabolic point, the glucose, the insulin, things like that. And it may actually be associated with a deficiency in C15.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so what we discovered is, because again, they're Navy dolphins, but they don't drink. Definitely non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in the dolphins. And it looks exactly like people, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So we started working with Dr. Jeff Schwimmer, who's a leader in fatty liver disease in NAFLD and now MASLD in children. And he said, gosh, I'd love to see the slides you have from your dolphin livers, and let me take a look. And he came back and said, this is the exact same disease. And it's blowing my mind because, the human world's been focusing on sugars and, how are these inciting it? And he's like, well, dolphins don't eat sugar. So how is it happening? And so that's where we discovered that it was nutritional C15 deficiencies. It was low C15 in some of the dolphins' diets that was causing fatty liver disease. And now there's a whole world that's starting to understand that if we have a low C15, this leads to changes in the liver that are fatty liver disease. And then the metabolic part comes after it. So it's because we've injured the liver, now we have insulin resistance and high glucose and high cholesterol. And this isn't, like you suggested, Carrie, this isn't going to be the phenotype for everybody, but there seems to be a pretty large subset in which C15 deficiency caused this. Why did NAFLD show up in 1980 and now affects 1 in 3 people globally? We think that C15 deficiencies are a big driver of it.
That is absolutely incredible to think about. And I'm going to ask you this later, so I'm going to put a pin in it, because one of the areas of focus for the root cause medicine are women going through perimenopause and menopause, and fatty liver tends to show up in this transition among a whole lot of other things. They often associated with, estradiol's declining, progesterone's declining, glucose and insulin are going up, you're getting more metabolically unstable, bada bing, you get fatty liver. However, if the precursor is the deficiency in C15 leading to injury to the liver, then the perfect storm happens around this age group.
That's right. Like our ultimate aging accelerated time in life, right?
Oh, yes. Okay, that's my next question. And so speaking of, just published June 2024 in Metabolites, it's been shown, C15 has been shown to stabilize cell membranes and repair mitochondrial function. And it was referred to as cellular fragility syndrome. And I want to dive into that because that doesn't apply to just the liver, but the whole freaking body and aging.
Yeah, so it makes sense that as an essential fatty acid, so if C15 is truly essential, then it means that if our bodies have too low levels of it, we will develop disease that is specific to that deficiency. So you think about like vitamin C and scurvy, right, pirates, and vitamin D and rickets, that there's actually a deficiency syndrome associated with that low. So for now, the paper that we published in June shows C15 deficiency causes a disease, and it's called cellular fragility syndrome. And what it does is, like you're saying, Carrie, our whole body is made of cells. The deficiency syndrome affects each and every one of our cells because C15's whole job is just to keep the membrane of our cells, which is made up of fatty acids, to keep it strong. C15 is a super sturdy, strong fatty acid, resistant to lipid peroxidation, reactive oxidation, all these things that happen as we get older. It literally strengthens the integrity of our cell membrane so that our cells can stay strong and fight off aging-related breakdown. If we don't have enough C15, it actually accelerates the aging process. And this is where we propose that helps explain why younger and younger people are getting heart disease, fatty liver disease, certain types of cancers, is because they don't have that basic brick structure to be able to protect their cells.
I was talking, my husband is not in this field at all, and I was explaining the journal article to him because I just nerd out all the things to him. So he's going to learn by default whether he wants to or not. But I was saying to him, it sounds like it's like our house in a neighborhood. So the C15 is stabilizing all the walls of our house. And if we don't have it or it's depleting deficiencies, then water can come in, the elements can come in, bugs can come in, bad things can come in. And now we have an infiltration of this stuff in our house, and that's like your cell. And now this cell or my house, all the houses in the neighborhood are not going to be healthy, which is, of course, going to lead to, as you said, all the chronic disease, all the symptoms we're dealing with. Is that an okay analogy?
I love it. I would trademark that. It's spot on, right? So what
you can have it.
There's only so much you get, only so long your house is going to last if you don't have sturdy walls to protect you from the outside elements. So it's exactly spot on. And interestingly, back in 2012, a team of scientists at Columbia University discovered this whole new way that our cells were dying, and they called it ferroptosis. And
yes.
Right. And so it's like when you go to a cell biology class, there are 3 ways your cells die. And they talk about apoptosis and necrosis and autophagy. And that's just how it's always been. Our cells die in 3 different ways. And they introduced an entirely new way that our cells were dying. Since 2012, there have been over 10,000 peer-reviewed papers on ferroptosis. Despite all those papers, Carrie, nobody could explain, why did ferroptosis show up? And why is it accelerating our aging? Why is it contributing to the onset and progression of all these chronic diseases that we're seeing until now? And so what we've proposed is that C15 nutritional deficiencies are the cause of this whole new method of cell death. So hence cellular fragility syndrome. Let's get our cells strong and back on track.
This is so great because first of all, I'm going to have you explain ferroptosis. But before I do that, I surmise a lot of listeners understand autophagy, because autophagy is the new golden child discussed all over social media. We discuss it on the podcast. Anyone who's quote unquote into biohacking, whether you like the word or not, intermittent fasting, it's all autophagy always comes out, our cell death. However, it's not the only, and nobody talks about ferroptosis. In fact, I think it was in researching this and you that I did the rabbit hole of ferroptosis. So explain that to everybody.
Sure, absolutely. So ferroptosis is a method of our cells dying. And here are the order of events. So basically it literally starts with the fragility of our cell membranes. So as described by the Columbia University scientists, they found that our cell membranes become fragile, which means they have fragile fatty acids in them. What are fragile fatty acids? These are fatty acids that have a lot of double bonds in them. We know them as unsaturated fatty acids or polyunsaturated fatty. And every time there's a double bond in a fatty acid, that is a weak point that can get attacked by oxygen. And so ferroptosis starts with we don't know why, but the cell membrane becomes more fragile. It gets attacked by oxygen, and you have an increase in this lipid peroxidation. So that's step 1. Step 2 is that for previously unknown reasons, free damaging iron is showing up in cells. And we usually think of iron deficiency or iron being good for us, which it is in most cases. But if it's in excess form and it's in its free form, it's actually, you think about a metal sitting and rusting somewhere, it's bad. So we have this strange iron showing up in our cells. That combines with the lipid peroxidation. And when you combine those two, it creates this massive production of what's called reactive oxygen species, or ROS. And that then goes after the mitochondria. And so in the end, our cells die because it knocks out our batteries. So the powerhouses of our cells are all taken down. So when you look at this cell under the microscope, it's fully intact. The membrane might look a little wonky. The nucleus looks fine, but all the mitochondria are dead. So it's a very distinct form of cell death that previously had not been recognized.
The nerd in me is just absolutely fascinated out right now. And I say this also because I have had Dr. Casey Means on the podcast. I have had Dr. Molly Maloof on the podcast, both talking about metabolic health and mitochondrial health. And they both essentially kind of said the same thing. We all learned the mitochondria are our cellular powerhouses. And Dr. Casey actually had the best analogy, since we're sticking with analogies. She talked about the difference between running your health, your cells, by candlelight or by like full spectrum light. And so she said, if you are feeling like you're running by candlelight, which is great in romance, but not great when you're trying to grow hair, right? Or make a hormone or fight off a thing. And she said, what happens is that when the mitochondria are threatened, they send an SOS out to the immune system. And so the immune system, and it can be threatened for a variety of reasons. So the immune system comes and it's just like blindly attacking. It's like, well, you said come and save you, so I'm trying. And it makes me think, if we had, yes, the metabolic health is very real in our society, but if we had the C15, if we had strong walls to begin with, then first of all, as you're saying, the cells wouldn't be as fragile, and we can save our mitochondria and not have all the symptoms of chronic disease or maybe less.
Yeah,
and we're currently having.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because now it's not saying, okay, take C15 and live forever, but it's about C15's role as a geroprotector, right? Where its job is it can extend our personal longevity by staving off and slowing the onset of the chronic diseases that eventually take us out. So that's really, and to me, I think that's where most of us care about, right? Because that's also talking about quality of life for the last, for some people, 50 years of their life. So it's, really exciting to make that the dolphins helped us find such a simple discovery. And the upside of nutritional deficiencies is they're readily detectable and they're absolutely fixable. We don't have to get fancy or expensive as far as treatments.
How much of our cell contains C15? Is it a big percent, a tiny percent?
It's amazingly tiny, Carrie. So it's just like this tiny, mighty molecule. So what we were able to show in our paper is that our cell membranes must have at least 0.2% of all the fatty acids in our cell membrane must have C15 in there. If it's that or less, our cell membranes become weak. You get at higher risk of, for sure, ferroptosis, but also numerous studies, and in fact, meta-analyses, studies of large prospective cohort studies have shown that if we have C15s at these low levels, we're at a higher risk of having or developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease. And then if we're between greater than 0.2 to 0.4%, we're calling that the healthy zone. So our cells it's like a house that has good enough walls and a roof to be able to live in and enjoy, but it may not sustain, let's say, a threat against a hurricane. And then there's these levels that have been revealed by, for example, in Sardinia, where people are the Centenarians, the island of Centenarians, one of these longevity blue zones, Carrie, their C15 levels are around 0.6. So it's like 3 times higher. Most people are sitting at that 0.2. So they're either truly already have a nutritional deficiency, or they're standing right on that ledge, on the cliff of becoming deficient. So we don't want to have it where you just take one step and you fall off. Let's get people in the safe zone. Sardinia, my goodness, they're at this extraordinarily high level because of their special diet that they have in Sardinia.
I was going to ask you that. I was thinking of health span. So health span is not that you necessarily live longer, but however long you happen to live is healthy. So you still might get chronic disease, but you don't get it till later as opposed to earlier, right? So I was thinking of the Centenarians And their diet probably includes C15 foods. They probably have whole fat dairy, full dairy.
It's a fascinating diet because there are a few things about the Sardinian diet. They have basically replaced meat. They have meat like on Sundays and special occasions, but otherwise they've replaced meat with dairy. And specifically, they have their own goats and sheep. And so local, right? And they live in a mountainous region in which the goats and sheep graze on mountainous grass that has the highest C15 levels. That translates into the goats and sheep having high C15 levels. And the cheese that we're most familiar with from that region is pecorino. And so pecorino cheese, for example, has twice as much C15 in it as even cow's butter, which previously was what we appreciated as a relatively high C15 food. So all of these pieces, we now know that if cows are fed grass versus corn, they have twice as much C15 in their milk. If that grass comes from a mountainous region, like the Alpines, even more C15. So Sardinia had just the perfect spot to be able to, really leverage and capitalize on the longevity enhancing benefits of C15.
All the dairy lovers out there are uniting right now. They're celebrating. They're like, this is amazing. I will just make a few tweaks. And the region I purchased my cheese from, this is fantastic. Okay, but people like me who can't eat dairy or shouldn't, what can we do?
Right. So that's where the Navy. So, this discovery was made while I was at the Navy. So this is a Navy technology. And at the military, our job is to solve for the problem. Right. So we had a recognized problem, a gifted problem of old dolphins. So because they're living so long. And then wanting to solve for the problem for these faster agers. Once we identified it with C15, they are giving them more fish with more C15 in it. But really the problem to solve is that all foods that have C15 in them, especially butter and whole dairy fat, has much higher levels of pro-inflammatory saturated fats. So C16 and C18, these even chain saturated fats, are associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease. So while there's about 1% of C15 in dairy fat, over 40% of the fatty acids in dairy fat are pro-inflammatory. So there was actually a group that gathered back in 2017, and they talked about this problem. They said, we keep seeing benefits of individual nutrients in dairy fat, and when you do the studies on those individual ingredients, they do great. But we don't see those benefits coming through in major studies on dairy fat. So just by eating and drinking milk. So they concluded that individual ingredients in dairy fat are actually better served on their own. And that's why we created, a pure C15 ingredient absent of all of these other basically competitors of its benefits. So let it do its job. So all the studies, we've talked about that are that we share on discoverc15.com. That's where all the C15 peer-reviewed nerd out world is. All those studies are done with the pure C15 ingredient. And so that's why, in addition, because we're working from a pure ingredient, it can be vegan friendly. So we made it vegan friendly to be able to address those issues as well. So that's what, and then we're able to create it just the right dose that needs to be done. And that's what led to Fatty 15, the supplement.
Can you test for the amount of fatty 15 in your cells?
You can, which is great. So fatty acid panels have been available for a long time. Sometimes C15 is included and sometimes it isn't. So Genova Diagnostics specifically has included C15 in their panel for a long time. And then I'm just coming out within 2 weeks an at-home C15 test that people can take, and with Genova, in which they can order it, do their blood spot test at home, send it back in, and they get their C15 reading. So to really help understand, people can understand where they're at. Are they at the cliff where most people are, which is at 0.2%? Are they high above it in the safe and longevity zones? Or we have some people who've been really far, far below it. And that can help dictate and drive your supplement regimen moving forward.
So is there a schedule for supplementation depending on chronic disease, your age, your sex, things like this? Or is it pretty standard based on what you've seen on the research you've done?
It's a great question. So it's going to be somewhat personalized based upon, where people are at, how deficient are you, what are your goals. However, we've had Fatty 15 out on the market since 2021, and reliably since day one, half of the people who take Fatty 15, half of the people who take just the 100 milligram capsule per day, half of those people feel benefits within 2 weeks. So, which we were not expecting, Carrie. We're like, this is for your metabolic, liver and heart health, 3 to 6 months. Go to your doctor, get your test before, go after, test your liver enzymes, your glucose, your inflammatory panel, your CBC and chems. But when we put Fatty 15 out and I started taking it myself, I was sleeping better and I had less appetite between meals and my mood was better. I was able to handle stressful situations. And I thought, this has got to be placebo. Like, it's really strange. But that's then when we discovered that our bodies use C15 to make a second molecule called pentadecanyl carnitine, or PDC, which fully activates our endocannabinoid system. So it activates CB1 and CB2. Now we're getting to the heart of explaining why, improved sleep, less joint pain, and better mood is like, oh, it's probably because of this metabolite.
That is fascinating. Okay, and can it go rancid?
It doesn't go rancid. So the huge benefit, like even from the cell strengthening part, right, is that because it has no double bonds, it is not susceptible to attack by oxygen. And that's what this lipid peroxidation is, what we know as rancidity. So it has this benefit of this solid white powder in the bottle, but it also stays stable and protects us against oxidation in our cells. It feeds into this whole hypothesis called the cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging that was brought out by Holbert. And he showed that the more stable, less rancid, more rancid proof of fatty acid in our cell membranes, the longer a mammalian species lives. So he said, this explains how humans and dolphins and elephants live longer than mice. That mice they have all these fatty acids susceptible to rancidity, basically, in their body, and we protect ourselves a lot longer.
This makes so much sense because when I look at research on women's health, perimenopause, menopause, cycling, fertility, whatever, there's, of course, the aging theory of the ovaries, because the production of a hormone, your actual hormone factories in your ovaries, create a lot of those reactive oxygen species, those chemicals that float around and cause all sorts of damage. And so over time, over decades, then it leads to problems. And all of a sudden you're perimenopausal and then you're menopausal. Yes, your follicles are also dying and you're only born with a finite amount. However, on top of it, why do women go through sooner compared to others? Is it genetics? Is it this cellular aging? Because these factories producing a hormone is a lot of work and creates a lot of inflammation. And so and I hear pros and cons. No, that's not true. Yes, it can be true. And so listening to this, I'm like, I knew it.
There's a fast track to that too, as well, Carrie. It's very insightful that there's a, disease, there's a condition called diminished ovarian syndrome.
Yeah. Premature ovarian.
Yeah, there you go. And so there was a study that was done that showed that women who have this condition have lower C15. Yeah. And they're basically around the ovaries, or in the ovaries. And so one of the hypotheses from that paper that they concluded is that C15 may help protect the integrity of basically our oocytes and how long we end up having a reserve, and that the diminished state is an accelerated form of decreasing C15 that we have over time with age.
Okay, so the next question is, what age decade do you tend to recommend? Because I know a lot of people listening right now are perimenopausal, menopausal, if you're female, thinking, oh my God, is it too late for me? Should I have started in my 30s, my 20s? Or can I just go ahead and jump on it right now?
I'm 52. And so we launched in 2021. So I can tell you it's not too late. In fact, our most avid fan base are people who are 45 plusers. And it's because we have the pain points of aging. And a lot of people explain fatty 15 when they take it. It's like, it fixes me where I'm broken. And if you're not broken yet, then you're kind of like, okay, I need to take this to help stave off, right, the onset of age-related breakdown. But what's nice is it's not just like, well, sorry, if you're already broken down, too late. It actually goes in and is truly repairing our cells, repairing our mitochondria. I stopped roaming the halls in the middle of the night, sleeping. I was like ghost mom, in the evening.
Oh yeah.
And joints, with menopause, perimenopause, my joints. I started eating tennis elbow when I don't play tennis, and all the things, right? Accelerated aging, and Fatty 15 took care of those for me. So I can attest personally that it is not too late. And we have plenty of folks, even in their 70s and 80s, who are just saying they've gotten their life back because of Fatty 15.
I even think of people who, and I know oddly enough, several people who the act of exercise makes them feel worse. Like exercise is a good stress. We call it a hormetic stress. It is still a stress. It still releases a lot of reactive oxygen species. So some people feel, and some people listening are probably thinking, that's me. Whenever I exert myself, I get puffy and swollen, or I just feel blah, yeah. I just feel super bad afterwards. I mean, I think of not only chronic disease and health span and longevity, but I even think of the day-to-day just trying to function, but the walls of your house aren't doing so hot.
Yeah, you're spending too much time during energy trying to hold together, and it's you don't have time for anything else except for just like surviving. That's a great analogy.
Is there a time of day that's better to take it?
Most people take it in the morning. I'd say over 90%. I take it in the morning, and even I open it up and I melt the powder in my coffee in the morning. So most people the capsule's super tiny. Tiny.
It's really tiny. I've seen it.
It's not a problem. It's super easy to incorporate as part of your daily routine. We have over 98% of our customers report that it becomes part of their daily routine within 2 weeks, and they stay the same at 6 weeks and at 4 months. So easy to take. Some people, we recommend 1 to 2. We recommend start with 1 and see how that goes, and then wait and see if you need to or not. Now then the test is available. I think that'll help people guide when they take 1 versus 2. And there's some people who say when they take it at night, or they'll split, it'll take 1 in the morning, 1 at night. That helps them with sleep at night. But I still get the sleep benefits just by taking them in the morning.
I love that. And does it replace or in addition to your omega-3s, your fish oil capsule? Or
the fish oil world is going through its own challenges.
Yes.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, first it's fish oil. So, right, it's oil from fish, which is like 1800s style. And that the oils, the omega-3s, are polyunsaturated fatty acids. And so they have a lot of double bonds. They're susceptible to lipid peroxidation. And not only in our bodies, but in the bottle. So the problem is when we talk about omega-3 supplements, it's not the manufacturer's fault, right? It's just that this molecule is an oil. It's super susceptible to lipid peroxidation and rancidity. So if you open up a bottle and it smells like fish, that's
or worse.
That's rancidity. So repeatedly studies that pull, just random omega-3 products off the shelf, whether they're high priced, low priced, pretty reliably, half of them have lipid peroxidation above your international voluntary safety levels. So that's the challenge, but you do need omega-3s. So get them for fish. If you can eat fish, eating fish is your best way of getting those omega-3s. If your doctor is prescribing a pure omega-3 has performed the best. It's had challenges, but it has survived the most rigorous studies. And if your doctor is telling you to take even omega-3 supplements because you have existing heart disease, there is suggestion that can help. But what NIH and American Heart Association have concluded is that for the general public, that omega-3s don't provide, based upon the latest randomized controlled clinical trials, the quality control issues, that they actually don't recommend omega-3s for most people. So for that reason, because we also then tested Fatty 15 head-to-head against pure omega-3 EPA. And we showed that it had all the benefits of omega-3 that E15 did, plus 3 times more cellular-based benefits. So for those reasons, if you're having a hard time taking omega-3s and your doctor is not directly telling you to take it for heart reasons, it can be a replacement. That was a long answer, but it was important.
I mean, it's a good one because it's going to come up, and omega-3s have been discussed for decades, right? That's the fatty acid that we've all known and loved and heard about for decades. And so I know that's important. Okay, I have 2 more questions, I think. One, I'm assuming, but I don't want to assume, C15 would be okay pregnant or breastfeeding?
That is correct. So we put it through generally recognized as safe, all the FDA recommended processes to assess safety for that. And so an independent panel deemed it safe for pregnancy and for nursing women. And there's a whole series of studies that have come out independent of us showing that the more C15 mom has, the more she has in her milk, the more milk she has, the more baby gets. And the higher C15 baby gets through mom, the better the growth of that infant, the better the cognitive development. And there's a multi-year study that's ongoing in France that shows that children with higher C15 that they got from mom results in better cognitive development at ages 2, 3, 5, and 6 thus far. So lots more coming. Infant formula has no C15 in it.
That was my next question.
And so have we been creating whole new generations of C15 deficient generations, basically.
Can infants?
Not yet.
We're
working on that under encouraging words from the regulatory folks. So, and there are calls to action to get C15 into infant formula from others. So we're working on that. But in the meantime, it's ages 4 and up.
4 and up. Okay. So I didn't have 2 questions because that was a good question. My last question is, are there any side effects that we need to know about?
We haven't seen any that have been beyond placebo. So there have been 2 clinical randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials with fatty 15. They showed that some people reported, kind of your typical side effects with, like a headache or gastric upset. But Carrie it was the same prevalence, in fact, a little bit higher in the placebo group. So no, it's been remarkably safe. Of course, every body is different. And so listen to your body anytime you take something new. Talk to your physician if you have underlying conditions. Before taking fatty 15, you can direct them to C15 or discoverc15.com. And then the biggest thing is just listen to your body. And just because everyone's different, but in general, incredibly safe. Again, think about it. It's in mother's milk. It's been in our food supply since the beginning of mammals. So a naturally essential and safe nutrient.
And I think this is so fascinating because in the world of, again, excuse my word, of biohacking, there are all sorts of interesting supplements or medications that have come out. And so I know those of us who've been at this a while are kind of eye rollers, right? We're like, another one, like another great one. Like, are you serious? And a lot of them don't exist in our body, but we have found them, or they're derived from, I don't know, a flavonoid or something really cool, and then concentrated and given as a supplement. When I was doing and deep diving into the research that you have on the site and going through PubMed on C15, I just kept thinking, it's in our cells. Like, it's already there. It's a deficiency like anything else. And it's been there the whole time, or not if you're deficient. We just didn't know it. Thank you, dolphins. We do now. And so before somebody says, this sounds too good to be true, I'm rolling my eyes. Oh, it's another anti-aging biohackery thing. It's like, no, it's an actual fatty acid in your cells that's just been discovered. So if you have a deficiency in whatever, B12, vitamin D, iron, it's very similar, but way bigger, way more expansive in what it does for the body. And I think that's fascinating.
Oh, well, thank you. It means a lot. And, for us, it's been about the science. We spent 10 years doing the science before we even thought, working with the Navy to bring fatty 15 to the world. In fact, our scientific advisors were like, enough is enough. They're like, but when we could do that, we could test this. And they're like, it's everything that you just said, Carrie. It's like, it's in our bodies. It's in our food supply. People aren't getting enough of it. fatty liver disease is growing at an exponential rate. Like, you have a moral obligation to bring this to the world, get it going. So that we did.
Stephanie, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm so glad you came on the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I'm so glad I got to interview you and get all of these knowledge bombs. Tell everyone again where they can learn more about you, the product, all the things.
Absolutely. So, and it's been a pleasure being on here, Carrie. You're wonderful. So you can go to fatty15.com to learn all about Fatty 15. Like I said, the science is at discoverc15.com. We have a little our story page where you can read a little bit about myself and my wonderful Navy physician husband, who we, came together to be able to bring this to the world. And for pre-sale now, Simon & Schuster actually reached out and said, we've been reading your Science Says blog on C15 Science for a year and a half. This is a book. Your story is amazing. So for sale, it's called The Longevity Nutrient, and it's wherever books are sold online, and it'll come out released on March 25th. 2025. So
oh my God.
All the science. It's a super just nerdy science book with some fun and adventure in it.
I am here for it. I love it. I'm so excited. I can't wait to pre-order it. And for everyone listening, yes, Stephanie and I talked right before the podcast. We will have a Root Cause Medicine code for you. So check the notes or in the intro, I will drop the code so that you can get a discount off your Fatty 15 and get yourself onto better longevity health. And for full disclosure, we don't have an affiliation with Fatty 15. I have used Fatty 15 and off and on, my fault, because things run out, you forget to order, and now I'm back on the subscription. But I may wait a little, do the test with my husband and see where I'm at.
Yeah, that's a great, great place to start and restart for sure.
Very cool. Well, again, everybody, check out all things Fatty 15. Stephanie, again, thank you for being on the podcast. This has been absolutely amazing.
It's been a great nerd blast. Appreciate being with you, Carrie.